Hi, I'm Gabe. This is going to be my corrective exercise continuum project on my brother's jumper near his patellar tendonitis. Right, so inflammation of the patellar tendon usually happens in sport when there's lots of landings, lots of running, lots of competencies that you could see that are putting excessive pressure on the ankle. So when we go to assess this, initially we start with posture. So we want to see if the neck is in line, the shoulders are in line, the hips, knees, and ankles, just to make sure that everything is good. As you can see here, there's a slight dip in his right shoulder. He has a slight forward head position, but the lower extremity seems to be doing okay. From there, we move into our overhead squat assessment. Same things that we're looking at: anterior knee travel, foot imbalances shifting to the right and left, or perhaps a butt wink or some rotation at the hip, which you can see with my brother. He is right-footed, so the weight shift onto the right side is warranted. But when we move on to our landing assessments, as he is a strength and conditioning coach, it might be hard to see some of the competencies that we expect, because he does coach and he does teach people how to land and jump almost daily. But as we notice with some of his movements, there is some anterior knee travel that could be putting excessive stress on the patellar tendon, as well as maybe shift onto the toes, which does the same. Um, from there, we go into our range of motion assessments. Normal range of motion for dorsiflexion is about 20 degrees. Because my brother is in New Mexico, I was not able to specifically test him, right? But my boy Jack here has a very solid amount of ankle dorsiflexion as he does run marathons. I think we assumed about a 30-degree shift, which is well above normal. Moving on, for patellar tendonitis, you want to test hip external rotation, as knee valgus and certain other competencies that you can see when landing will show themselves with decreased range of motion. But normal range of motion, abduction, about 45 degrees, seen about the same here as well. So nothing to be too concerned about with this range of motion test. Moving on, we want to test hip abduction, as if improper activation of the glute med is inhibited, then knee valgus and anterior translation of the knee and excessive force being put onto the toes, onto the knees during landing can happen. But normal range of motion being 45 degrees, this was also seen. So because we didn't see anything out of the ordinary, we want to move on to our manual muscle testing. Make sure that our hamstrings, our glute complexes are activating correctly, so that when we do go to perform athletic movements, they can assist us. So on a scale from 3 being the best and 1 being the worst, Jack here got a 3 on both hamstrings, easily able to activate and resist against myself as we move on. Particularly in the biceps femoris. Then we move on to the glute med, right? Testing his abduction strength. And as you can see from that test, his right leg only exhibited a 2. So I was able to overcome him there, which means that he could use some work on that right glute med. Moving into our corrective exercise continuum, right? We start with our inhibitory practices, our foam rolling, our self-myofascial release. Self-proclaimed tight hamstrings can often contribute to patellar tendonitis, so we initially start with a myofascial release technique, just foam rolling the hamstrings, anywhere from 10 to 15 rolls back and forth, moving and rotating the hip so that we can hit all aspects of the hamstring. Same thing. Now we trigger point hip flexors. Tight hip flexors can lead to anterior pelvic tilt, excessive forward knee travel in landing, and overall just tightness at the hip. So we want to spend about 30 seconds finding a space in that hip flexor that we know is tight and allowing it to release itself. From there, we move on to our lengthening, and band distractions are not necessarily a part of the lengthening process. However, releasing that joint capsule and allowing for synovial fluid to move through this joint provides increased range of motion and allows for the musculature to do what we want it to do. From this distraction standpoint, we move into lengthening those muscles that we just tried to inhibit. So the hamstrings, particularly with this bent knee hamstring stretch, spend about 5 seconds each leg, extending to a point where you feel discomfort, and doing that about 5 times. From there, we want to do the same thing with that quad hip flexor area that we just inhibited, just did some myofascial release on, rocking back and forth, doing this about 5 times, reaching up to really extend that hip flexor, that psoas area, and allow for us to move into our activations with full range of motion. From their activation, we saw some glute med weakness, saw some, so we want to make sure that during our activations that we allow for this to get better through some internal external rotations with the band. Anywhere from 10 to 15 reps per leg should do the trick at the beginning of the workout to activate the musculature before we go into our integration. Same thing with our lateral band walking, trying to make this more of a dynamic movement as we move through anywhere from 5 to 10 steps per leg. From there, we move into our integration, trying to make it as sport specific as possible. Sport is not just a sagittal plane movement. Frontal plane is often a discrepancy that you see in training. So lateral squatting, anywhere from 5 to 10 reps per leg as well, making sure that we don't see any knee valgus, making sure that we're keeping our knees over our toes and our posture is correct. Same thing. Now we move to our goblet reverse lunge. The reason we do the goblet is to maintain our upper back stability, core stability as we're allowed to. And then we just do the same thing, 5 to 10 reps per leg. Donna, you're amazing. I love you so much. Thank you for everything. And that's it.